Hello. How are you? Let's see. Got one person so far. Welcome to this live today where I am going to be doing a Q&A with my community. I've got so many great questions from you all, so I'm going to do my best to work through them. And please feel free to type anything in the chat. I'll be checking that as frequently as I can to make sure that I'm following up and being as thorough as possible. So let's start. I'm going to kind of answer these questions in the order received. So if I don't get to you today, we will do this again. And I'm just going to do my best to give as thorough and complete of an answer as possible versus short, short responses to just finish it. So I wrote them all out for us. Excuse me. Okay, so the first question I received is how can I stop comparing my lovability to others? Feeling very replaceable and easily forgettable, which drives a lot of fear in my life. So, this is such an important question because we do live in a society where we are taught almost just on this really deep subconscious level early in life that we're not worthy, that we have to do something to be worthy. And then we become highly susceptible to comparison when we look at the outside world like, oh, they have it figured out, I don't, or oh, they have something I don't have, or oh, I'm behind them, this sort of thing, where we then create an energetic response within the body through our thoughts of not feeling like we're in the right space or like we're good enough. And so we want to really check in with ourselves when we're going into a situation that feels vulnerable or that feels a little new or rocky, and really notice the space in which we are approaching it from. Are we approaching our love life or life in general from a space of wholeness, from a space of being enough, with the recognition that we all deserve a seat at the table? And it doesn't matter how impressive someone looks or how much they've done in their life, that you are an equal, that you are deserving of time, space, and respect no matter what. And that you are self adjusting to this again and again and again. So you are really remembering who you are. And you are not unconsciously sort of latching onto this seat of unworthiness and suddenly then putting yourself in a lower position where you have to audition or do something to show that you're good enough or to convince them that that you're allowed to want what you want. We all do this in such subtle ways, and consider that we can feel this at a gut level, right? We can kind of connect to this when someone is not fully embracing themselves. And it is a subtle way of devaluing, and also becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because what, of course, we direct our energy to, we unconsciously begin to play out. And so, if this is hard for you, or if you kind of find yourself going unconscious and going back into that lack seed or not feeling like you're enough, I really invite you to set reminders, write it down, check in with yourself again and again to make sure that you are truly approaching things from a space of knowing that you're enough and knowing that you can handle anything that comes your way, because so much of this is also about not wanting to feel those uncomfortable emotions of rejection or of not being accepted or of being embarrassed. And a lot of it is just trusting that you can handle those emotions. And the more that you face them, the more bandwidth you develop, and the more you realize, like, oh, okay, I've got this. I don't have to try to avoid discomfort. I can actually face it head on and then be able to handle more and more in my life as a result. And this is kind of what keeps us expanding versus shrinking our world and kind of living in a box because we're so scared of feeling those uncomfortable emotions or of facing those feelings of uncertainty. So this truly is a practice, but it starts with those baby steps. I'm a huge believer in baby steps, not sort of just taking that deep dive, but supporting ourselves and slowly regulating and showing up for ourselves in a very intentional, very deliberate and very slow way so we can truly integrate it versus kind of shocking the system by kind of that sink or swim mentality that we see so often in our world. So gently guide and support yourself in this way, and it will feel really sustainable. And before you know it, you're going to be approaching love, intimacy, friendships, work, any area of your life from knowing you really deserve a seat at the table. Let me know if anyone has any thoughts on this. Otherwise, I'm just going to move on to the second question, which was also, they all were really great questions. I was blown away by some of the really wonderful questions I received. This one was interesting. Men say that they value a feminine, sweet, agreeable, less promiscuous woman. Many women feel these values are constraining and old-fashioned. How do we overcome this mismatch? How can we be pleasing and attractive to men or to the masculine without feeling like we're playing a part or succumbing to traditional stereotypes? Okay, so for this, I want you to remember that the masculine and feminine are not gender specific, right? So most of the women that I coach really desire to be in their feminine energy, meaning they don't want to lead it. They want to be in their beingness more and their receptivity more. But sometimes I do have a woman that really genuinely prefers to be in that masculine. But consider it's about then not recognizing that you're not going to attract or be as compatible with a masculine energy man if you're in that space. And so you can be a masculine energy woman and desire a man who's more dominant in his feminine energy, who wants to sort of be that supportive role and that does best in that space. So it's really about making sure that there's that balance of polarity, right? And sometimes women will, well, anyone will misinterpret the feminine energy as something that's absolute, right? And it means that you don't get to have a say, you don't get to have an opinion, you don't get to have, a voice of any sort. And that's not it. We're not talking about like being this tap dancer who doesn't have, a complex sort of thought process or, emotional experience, but it's about developing a high level of emotional intelligence. So first, you recognize that you can say anything at the right time, but feminine energy really recognizes timing, right? You recognize when something is going to be heard and when it's not, when you're coming from a peaceful space or when you're triggered, and being able to recognize that you're playing the long game here. We're not trying to immediately get something off of our chest and react to feelings of urgency. This is a really, really key component to it. I wrote a few points down on this because I want to speak to this question really thoroughly because I feel like this is a huge one where women kind of get a little bit caught. Let's see. It's also in letting go of the need to be right. This righteous energy. We want to catch this in ourselves and come from a softer, more loving space. It's about just really being in truth, and the feminine energy and any feelings that you're experiencing are showing you what lives inside of you that are then getting triggered in intimacy or whatever the situation is at hand. So it's just showing you your work and where you can stretch yourself and where you can grow and where you can process it and then communicate it in a more loving, deliberate, and intentional way. And it's letting go of the need to be right, really making the choice to be happy over right, knowing that you do not get both, right? And recognizing that the feeling of being happy and satisfied is so much more fulfilling than the need to be right or have the final say or present the data points that you've been accumulating or doing this sort of tit for tat battle where you did this, now I'm going to do this, where everything is more strategic and calculated and from that survival mode. It's about softening into recognizing that you get to say whatever you need to say, but you're not going to break out of your commitment to be a peaceful person for anybody, because you know that that doesn't feel aligned or feel right inside of you. This is living a life with a lot of integrity. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about doing your absolute best to be the highest version of yourself that you can, and to then be in awe of what that inspires in others. It's really, really beautiful, because in my experience, so many, not everybody, right? So don't get discouraged, not everybody, but in my experience, most people cannot resist that warmth, that consciousness, that softness, that intention, right? I've seen that in so many areas of my life, but we all have that sort of programming and that instinct to match energy. So when we see someone being rude or see someone being impatient or not doing the right thing, we kind of want to match it, and our instincts go up to want to sort of, up level it and escalate it to protect ourselves and to, feel a sense of control and safety. But if you can kind of catch this and really recognize where you are in time and space, and if that's required of you in the moment, you can then self-adjust and decide, I'm not in the jungle here. I'm not fighting for the last drip of water. I can show up in a way that's intentional and that is more aligned with my higher self. So those low instincts and those low frequencies don't take over. And much of the time, you'll inspire something completely different in the masculine or in another person. It's so beautiful. And so I invite you to practice this. I gave an example of this in one of my groups recently, because I was dealing with a masculine man, not my husband, but in the community, that was kind of being like hard and difficult. And I was going to see him regularly. So I knew that I couldn't just match his instinct. And so I recognized that tendency within me, and I decided I was just going to show up. It's just going to show up vulnerably, make eye contact, smile, and do my best to put forth the energy that I wanted to feel and that I wanted to invite in. And it was so beautiful. And again, this doesn't happen with everyone, right? There are times where someone's like, nope, I'm staying angry, or I'm staying closed off. But in this situation, it really opened something up where he just couldn't resist that intention. And we ended up having a lot of laughs and a lovely rapport, and more and more sort of heartfelt exchanges where we just saw that aspect of each other and drew it out. And when you have those moments, it feels really, really good, because it's like, wow, you feel yourself taking the high road. You feel yourself connecting to that alignment and that integrity and that deeper soul aspect of who you are, and come from that place, and you realize just your strength and in the feminine. So to answer this question more fully, it's like the feminine energy is redefining strength. Like all the things culturally we taught that are strong, redefining that based off of really understanding ourselves and seeing that that's actually a lot easier to like go off on someone or to say that thing or to react impulsively. That's actually much easier. And the quiet, deliberate strength that we build through integrity and really showing up to that higher aspect that lives inside of each of us. So I hope that speaks to it. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Let's see. Question number 3. How do I be vulnerable in the moment? Baby steps I can take. So this comes up a lot because I have a lot of situations where women that I coach will have a delayed recognition of what they could have said or done in the moment, where it's like, oh, 2 weeks later, 1 week later, this is actually what I felt, or this is what I could have said. So how do we sort of show up to those difficult, uncomfortable, vulnerable emotions in real time? Sometimes it requires kind of checking in, so taking a breath and sort of recognizing where we are in time and space, feeling comfortable enough with ourselves to tell another person that we kind of need to take a moment or feel our way through it first, not feeling like we have to respond immediately. because when we respond immediately, we tend to go into whatever we've automated. We tend to just answer from whether we're a people pleaser, whether we are, overgiver, all of these unconscious patterns where we kind of lose ourselves and, we just answer the way we always have versus really taking a moment to connect to what we're feeling and what feels right inside, rather than later realizing that yes was actually a no, or vice versa. So there's nothing wrong with saying, let me think about that, or let me feel my way through that. Can I get back to you? This is a wonderful way to give yourself time to better understand what it is you want and what it is you're feeling before you obligate or give your commitment to something. And notice too, in those moments of vulnerability, how you may want to either make a joke, right? We use sarcasm a lot to avoid vulnerability, to sort of like get some kind of release, but that can land really poorly because depending upon how we're using it, the other person can take it as rejection or as a form of avoidance, or just something where it's like they're trying to connect and you've kind of blocked it. So sarcasm, getting defensive, quickly answering, like I mentioned before, and instead just staying open and taking a moment to figure out what you're feeling. How is this making me feel? Are you in an environment where you can say it? Of course, if it's an intimacy, you can say, oh, that feels really vulnerable. If you're at work, not so much. You can say, I need to process that. Let me take a moment. Can I get back to you? That would be a very good way. Or being able to practice receiving versus deflecting. Like, thank you so much. I'm really practicing receiving compliments, and that feels really good to hear, even though, it's a little hard for me. Being able to speak your truth, right? Tell the truth. When in doubt, tell the truth. But you don't need to over explain, right? Part of this is also recognizing that we tend to want to over explain when we have an overactive nervous system. Like, we've got to make sure that they received us okay, that we're starting to connect more to their emotional experience than our own, and really being able to settle in with as few words as possible and state what it is we're feeling. This is a really powerful practice and one to practice. So when I used to get defensive, I would notice, okay, what's underneath this defensiveness? Usually it was hurt or a sadness or not feeling seen or feeling terribly misunderstood. So being able to speak to the emotion, I feel so misunderstood, or I feel really scared at this moment, and just being able to share that without needing a solution, and with just sort of giving voice to what's underneath whatever action is that you're about to take. That can be a really powerful way too, to start to tap into vulnerability and letting people see you. Would you share more about that part of being vulnerable? Hold on. Oh, thank you, Blossoms. So, okay. I'm not sure which part of vulnerability you're talking about, but again, this requires a slowing down. So many people don't want to slow down and they just want to go into that automated response. So really catch that in yourself and recognize, where you are in time and space, and move at a sustainable pace. So you're very intentional in your words, and you don't have to backpedal or fix something later as a result of just trying to satisfy the moment. And vulnerability is also very much connected to our relationship with uncertainty. Are we able to live in uncertainty? Are we able to create certainty within ourselves so we can deal with the uncertainties outside of ourselves? So the more we do things that are familiar and grounding and centering, the more we're going to be able to handle uncertainty in the world. So really make sure you have practices that you can turn to again and again and again, that support you in feeling that position of center within. So this way, the internal is directing the external, but we're not at a whim to the external world directing us, right? Okay. How do you set boundaries politely? I wanted to piggyback on this one. Let's see. I'll get to that question in just a moment. How do you set boundaries politely? I wanted to piggyback with this one because this is also one where less is more, where we don't need to give a big explanation as to why we can't do something or why something doesn't feel right. Sometimes a boundary can be as simple as I'm not able to do that, or no, or I can't. So we want to really kind of feel our way into it and, make sure that we're not going into big explanation. That doesn't feel right for me. Is there a way we can compromise? Or that doesn't feel right to me, yet I want to meet you halfway. What do you think that could be? And you start to sort of give solution. I love to share that any man over the age of 7, the masculine is very sort of solution oriented. So I even do this with my young boys, like, that doesn't work for me. What do you think? What do you think a good compromise would be? And I let them put on their thinking and present other options. And that way it's not just like I'm shutting you down, no, but I'm open, yet that doesn't work for me, or that doesn't feel right for me. But of course it depends upon what the boundary is. Like if it's a bigger boundary where you feel unsafe, or it's just like a hard no, then that's just like standing in your power and saying that doesn't work for me. I'm open to explore alternatives to that. But you're not going into why it doesn't work for you, trying to convince them to feel and understand why it doesn't work for you. Because if you notice and observe masculine, you'll see that they are taught very early, most men, to stand tall in their boundaries. Like I notice that all the time with men. No, like that doesn't work. No, I can't do that. Whereas women generally, culturally, we're taught as little girls, oh, don't you want to make that person happy? They're going to be sad if you don't do that. Like, oh, look, they're going to. I remember my parents, well intentioned, they used to always want to make me hug this family friend that I didn't want to hug. And they would always say to me, oh, but you should hug him. He's going to be sad if you don't hug him. But my boundary was no. But then I was taught so early to take responsibility for this other person's experience that as an adult, I had to go back and really relearn how to have boundaries for myself. So pay attention to this within yourself and this old automated conditioning and start to make decisions rooted in self-love. And that kind of goes with the question in the chat. How do we notice when we start to abandon ourselves? And how do we bring us back to ourselves? And it's like, where am I answering from? Am I answering from their vantage point and what I think they need? Or am I standing in my own emotional experience? Because this is something you want to return to again and again and again. So you truly remember who you are, and you are loving yourself first, recognizing that this is not selfish, that this is going to allow you to be of the highest quality to others in your life. But the second you start to abandon yourself and try to figure out what they need, you start to create a disconnect that usually turns into resentment or feeling sad or angry at yourself because on a conscious level you could have shown up differently and that you should have made yourself a priority in that moment. And so part of building this is truly like that remembrance of who you are and connecting to that again and again. I'm a big believer in setting reminders for this. I'm a big believer in wearing something where it's like, oh wait, where am I right now? Am I in their world or am I in my own? Getting to know yourself, not being afraid to spend time alone with yourself and explore your subconscious mind, what you feel, what you yearn for, what you desire, being able to slowly open that up and embrace it versus kind of fight with it and justify all the reasons like you shouldn't have it or you shouldn't feel that way, and to really quiet the mind enough where you're not kind of fighting with yourself, but you're allowing that that flow and that intuition to start to guide you versus kind of the tendency in society to kind of take a poll and figure out what Sarah or Bob would do, and instead like figuring out what you want to do and let that be enough. So this goes into a bigger exploration of self-trust, because the more we trust ourselves, of course, then the more we're going to feel safe trusting the masculine as a whole. But it starts with trusting ourselves. So often it's the reverse, right? Where we don't trust ourselves, and therefore we're like, I can't trust him. I can't trust the masculine. How can I do that? I need a guarantee. I need to control this. But when we really develop self-trust, we recognize that we can handle so much more than we ever thought, right? Let's see. Okay. My partner feels frustrated that we don't have enough intimacy and it turns into a fight. This is a bigger conversation about men and women do have different needs. And it's not one or the other, but it's about meeting each other halfway and recognizing that we do have different needs and we're both going to be asked to stretch ourselves at different times. And so really feeling into this question as well, like where can I show up and recognize that, you know, we have different needs, and how I can sort of show up to what he needs and he can also show up to what I need, and it becomes this beautiful dance. And if this becomes a source of contention, you know, letting some of that resistance die down. Some of the biggest things I see is wanting to talk about it, wanting to justify, wanting to convince him to see why you feel the way you do, or why you're tired or in the mood that you're in, and stop all of that. And instead, really just let him have his emotional experience. If this is sort of a position of conflict in the moment, let him have that experience and let him experience that, and then come back together from a space of clarity and calm and getting underneath it, to talk about where you can meet each other halfway and where you can really show up, or get to that space within yourself and stretch yourself to see what's possible, and to choose yourself and choose your partner at the same time, recognizing that you both have different needs at different times, and our ability to be flexible emotionally and in the moment, and sometimes also being able to honor and say, you know, I love you, yet no, you know, tonight is not, I'm not feeling it tonight yet. I'm open, you know, I'm open later, or whatever it may be. Being able to express and also have that flexibility to meet them halfway is huge. But I think that the bigger piece to this is too, sometimes we're scared to, what if the man comes to ask why constantly? Ask why to what constantly? If you could be more specific in that, I'll try to circle back on that. I think that the bigger piece to this is the worry that women take on of someone having an intense emotional experience. Part of it is people are going to have intense emotional experiences in this life. And how can you trust, instead try to fix it and go into control? Let him be a big boy and have that experience, and then come together after some of it's been processed. This is not an easy thing to do, where we have been taught to take responsibility for other people, but it is one of the most powerful ways to self-heal and to convey trust to our partner. Like, I trust that you can handle emotions and that we can come together and find a solution. Okay, the other part to this question is, what if the man comes to ask why constantly, asks why regarding why I feel this way and why I don't like it? I don't know. I mean, you don't have to, unless you have a reason that you want to share. It could just be like, you know, I need to kind of feel my way through that, but I'm open to growing, and I'm open to exploring and learning, or I'm open to, you know, both of us meeting each other's needs in a way that feels good for both of us. And then just also maybe being a listener. You know, sometimes when our partner shares emotions that are difficult for us to hear, we immediately get defensive or want to kind of deflect it back to them. And sometimes it's like just being able to take a step back and just listen without giving a solution, which is so hard, right? Kind of observe yourself and you'll notice how when difficult emotions are given to you, how you want to go into fix it mode. And sometimes it's just that power to listen and hear what they have to say without providing any solution, and just being that present space where you allow them to share and give voice to anything on their mind. So I invite you to practice this as well. You can do this at work, of course. You can do this with friendships, with men, but don't wait for it to be some really intense situation. The more you practice this, the better you'll get at applying it when the stakes feel really, really high. Okay? So this is kind of our shorter live stream today. If this topic is meaningful to you, I have my upcoming group coming up April 17th. Just to kind of let you ladies know what it's about, we have a module on self-love and confidence. Some of you in here have actually taken this group. Self-love and confidence, boundary setting, feminine energy, and inner child healing. So we take a deep dive into all things related to this Q&A today, if that speaks to you. And I've got the details below for those of you that it may. Oh, you're welcome. I hope to do this again soon. I'm open to any feedback or any other questions this may have sparked, so please email them to me and we will make this a more frequent occurrence. Thank you for those of you that could be here. Much love. Talk soon.